Hey guys, welcome to Tank Tutorials. Today we're going to be doing a tutorial on how to make a Siamese fighter fish tank. So today I've got a fish tank which is I think about 40 litres, which is definitely more than enough for a fighter fish. But as a general rule, the bigger the tank, the better. So in this tank you will need a heater because the fighter fish is a tropical species. I've just got some gravel on the bottom of this tank at the moment, and I'm going to be putting in some live plants, some driftwood and some rocks. So for any new fish tank, it's important to make sure that there is the right amount of good bacteria so that your fish's waste gets broken down and doesn't suffocate the fish. So in order to do that, most new fish tanks come with these little ceramic filter parts, and these have a really high surface area, so they've got a lot of tiny little microscopic holes in them, which creates a lot of places for healthy bacteria to grow. So what you want to do is, if this is the first fish tank you've ever had in your life, you want to make sure that you soak these for a while in just some plain either rainwater or maybe pond water or some regular tap water that has been treated with dechlorinator. This just allows time for the bacteria to grow, and it's called cycling the tank, which is necessary before you put any livestock in, just to prevent any of the fish's wastes from building up. So I'm going to go ahead and put these into my filter. Another thing you can do if you already do have a fish tank is to soak them in that fish tank for a few days, or you can, if there's already some of these in that fish tank, you can grab some out of there. And that is called seeding the filter. So this is just a foam filter that's just for mechanical filtration, that just helps to take out any clumps of plants or dirt or anything like that from clogging up the filter. Now this is the filter's intake tube, and I am going to be housing some shrimp in my tank with the fighter fish. So shrimp are pretty small, and especially when they breed, the newborn shrimp are tiny and can get sucked up into the filter. So I'm going to put this sponge ring around the intake tube just to prevent the shrimp from getting sucked up. Alright, so this is my tank. As you can see, I've got the filter in there with the sponge on the bottom, and I've got a heater on the left. So for these fighter fish, they like temperatures around 26 degrees Celsius. So you just got to make sure that on hot days, if you live in a hot country, that you maintain a cooler tank for them if it gets above 30 degrees in the house. Otherwise, yeah, just keep your heater on pretty much for the whole time, because if it falls below anywhere around 23 degrees, their internal organs and their immune systems start to shut down. So yeah, really got to make sure that the temperature's right. So it's a good idea to start off with the rocks and plants before you put any water in. This is just to make sure that everything gets in the right place before you fill it up. Otherwise, when it's full of water, it's just really difficult. Things start floating around and you have to have your whole arm submerged, which just makes it kind of annoying. So I've just got a couple of rocks I'm just going to put in. And then I've got quite a few different types of plants today. So first plant I'm going to put in is this Anubias, which is already growing on a piece of driftwood. So these plants are technically not fully aquatic, but in a tank like this they do perfectly fine. Just got to make sure that you keep the water temperature up and keep them a decent amount of light. They can do well in low amounts of light, but they just grow really slowly. And with these plants, you got to make sure not to bury the roots, because they take all the nutrients from the water column. So as soon as you bury the roots start to rot and the plants don't get any nutrients. The next plant I'm going to add is this lace fern. These plants are super easy to grow. I've already got way too many of them in my tank, in my other tank. So you'll probably have to regularly trim these before they get out of control. These ones are very easy. You just plant the roots straight into the substrate and they'll pretty much thrive with any amount of light in almost any temperature. The next plant I'm going to add is this Java fern. These plants are similar to the Anubias in that you really shouldn't plant the roots into the substrate, because that's where they get all their nutrients from. So I'm just going to lay mine down next to my filter here to try and hide it a little bit. The roots will probably grow into the sponge filter. I've had that happen before, but I can just pull them out. It's not too much of a big deal. It helps them stay anchored, and the constant water flow near the filter is good for the nutrients getting to the roots. So finally I'm going to add this little bit of Java moss. This stuff grows like crazy, and because I'm going to be putting some shrimp in my tank, it gives a lot of good places for the shrimp to hide, and just makes it look more natural as well. With this stuff you can pretty much just put it wherever you like and it will attach itself to the rocks and pretty much to anything that it's touching, which is really good. Alright, now I'm going to add my water. Alright, so when you're pouring the water in, you've got to make sure that you don't uproot any of your plants, so try and pour it on rocks or maybe on the side of the tank. Okay, so I've got about 20 tiny little ghost shrimp in this tank, and just before I put these in, I'm going to put in some water conditioner to take out the chlorine of the water. It's really important to do this before you put in any animals. It's fine for the plants, but yeah, before you put any animals in, definitely make sure you've got the dechlorinator in, because they will probably die quite quickly without it. Okay, next I'm going to add this golden mystery snail to my tank. I've only got one of these, and in theory it should be fine with the fighter fish, but you can never really be too sure with fighter fish. It might try and have a little peck at the snail when he's out of his shell, but if this happens he'll just go back into his shell and he should be okay to come out and eat. Put him in. Now I'm going to put the light and the filter and the heater on. I only waited just because I had the whole lid off, which made it easier to pour the shrimp in. So I'm going to be using a net from now on, so I'm going to start the filter, get it running, get the water cycling through, put the heater on, get it to the right temperature, and start getting the fish in next. Alright, so I'm just going to grab these with a net, just so I don't get any of the aquarium water in there, just in case there's any parasites or anything. And I'll just put them right in. It's a good idea usually to make sure that the water temperature is the same in the bag as your tank, just so that you don't shock your fish. You can float your fish in the tank for a while if they are quite different temperatures, but these ones are quite similar, so I'm just putting them straight in. These fish that I'm putting in now are white cloud mountain minnows. They're from mountains in China, which is quite close to Thailand where the fighter fish is from, so I figured I'd stick with the Asia thing. Also, these fish are really small and quite peaceful, calm fish, so they're not going to nip the fins of the fighter fish, and the fighter fish shouldn't bother them either, because they're not very colourful. The fighter fish isn't going to think that they're any kind of threat. So I've just got, I think I've got about 6 or 7 of those, and they're usually quite good in a group. They tend to school if they're feeling stressed or anything, so it's a good idea to keep quite a few in the same tank together. Alright, now I'm going to put in my fighter fish. It's always a good idea when you're at the pet shop to take your time choosing them, because some of them can be either in poor health or they can just be really aggressive individual fish. So I chose this one because I thought he looked really cool, and he seemed to be quite nice and not too aggressive. So with a planted tank like this, in order to keep the plants healthy, you need at least 8 hours of light every day, probably no more than 12, and they should be fine. Also, you can put in liquid fertilizers if you want to, but for the plants that I've got, it's not really overly necessary. And the 8 to 12 hours of light a day is also good for the fish, because it gives them a regular sleep cycle, which keeps them healthy as well.